Hi, everybody. Hold on one sec. There we go. Sorry, nose is running. It's that time of year here in Arizona. It actually got cold, by which I mean 70. Whew. Very, very difficult tundra weather out here. Anyway, welcome back to Patriots History of the United States. I'm your host, Larry Swikart, reading through the book. We are in chapter 12, Sinews of Democracy. Let me remind you, because I know we just started second semester here in January, but Patriots History, the U.S. curriculum is available now at the Wild World of History. And this includes me teaching every single lesson in 45-minute to 1 hour long each videos. So you get 22 videos of me teaching Patriots History. If you email me at larry@wildworldofhistory.com, I will send you the new chapter 23 that I wrote that covers the years 2018 to 2023. Now, probably in the next year, I will upgrade that, update it to include 2018 to 2025. But in the meantime, I'm trying to complete a book called America in the 21st Century. And so, as you can imagine, that's going to include a lot of that stuff. It's going to be a good one. If you don't have my other books, check out A Patriot's History of Globalism. Boy, was I right about the decline of globalism. And Trump was just over in Davos giving him the what for. And these guys are in trouble. The globalists are collapsing on almost every front. They're still got a couple of, I don't know, Alamos out there, but they're going to be overrun pretty soon. So you might want to take a look at my book and see where and how I predicted they would collapse. Oh, yeah, and I do have a world history course at wildworldhistory.com. Goes from 1775 to the present, and the first semester is just done with videos and primary source documents. Second semester has my great book, one of my favorites, Patriot's History of the Modern World, Volume 1 and 2. A lot of reading in second semester, but it's worth it. Those are great books. Unfortunately, they didn't sell well, not like Patriots History did. And so they are out of print, but you can get them on our website for only $8.99 each, $8.99, $9.99 each. I think we raised prices by $1, $9.99 each. So check those out. All right. So we are in chapter 12, which is about America's business growth, industrial growth in the late 1800s. I guess I should mention, since we're in the age of Trump, that this was a period in which all of our national revenue, all of our taxes, came from tariffs or land sales. And I do believe it's possible to get back to almost that kind of a model. You say, well, land sales, well, the federal government owns 1/3 of the land in America. Now, we should consider selling off any and all federal assets that are not like national monuments or national parks. For example, right now, there's a whole bunch of office buildings in Washington, D.C., prime real estate that nobody's using because those employees still haven't come back to work. And Trump said he would fire them if they didn't. You could sell those. They'd make a ton of money to pay off the national debt. Start a national debt reduction fund and use every, say, 10% over what you get to run the country to specifically pay down that debt. Anyway, let's get started here. And we are in the header on page 456 called Raising Less Corn and More Hell. Now, let me remind you, I am reading from the 15th anniversary edition. And if you don't have the 15th anniversary edition, you're probably not going to be in sync with the page numbers, and some of the headers will be off. So what can I tell you? Raising Less Corn and More Hell. Farm organization efforts began as early as 1867 with the founding of the Patrons of Husbandry, more popularly known as the Grangers. Grange chapters spread rapidly, gaining momentum until the Grange had a membership of 1.5 million by 1874. Originally seen as a means to promote farm cooperatives, facilitating the purchase and sales of other farmers' products at lower prices, the Grange soon engaged in political lobbying on behalf of various regulations aimed at railroads and grain elevators. The Grangers managed to pass laws in 5 states that were challenged by the railroad and elevator owners, including the partners in a Chicago warehouse firm, Ira Y. Munn and George Scott. In the Munn against Illinois case, where Illinois Supreme Court held that the state legislature had broad powers to fix prices on everything from cab fares to bread prices. Bad decision. Munn and Scott were found guilty by an Illinois court of fixing prices, and Munn appealed, arguing that any arbitrary definition by the state about what constituted a maximum price violated the Constitution's takings clause in the 5th and 14th Amendments. Supreme Court held that the states could regulate property for the public good under the police powers provisions if it could be shown that the enterprise in question benefited from its public context. Unfortunately, the court did not consider the state's evidence that grain elevators had constituted a monopoly, and it ruled exclusively on the appeal of state authority to regulate. This left open the question of whether a business that happened to lack natural competition due to geography or choice of others not to compete was violating the law simply by existing. So this is a big deal. The court didn't look at this whole idea of what constitutes a monopoly, which it would later do in the Standard Oil case, which was horrible. You know, you can have a monopoly just because you have such a unique product. Nobody else wants to take the time or effort to try to copy it or get involved in the market. Or you could have a monopoly because, as Microsoft did for such a long time, the customers and consumers were all happy. They liked the price and they liked the product. The only people unhappy were people who wanted to compete with Microsoft. So it bears a real challenge here. The Grangers had already moved into a political activism that peaked with the election of 1880, and they soon faded, replaced by the farmers' alliances. The movement emphasized similar cooperative efforts, but also stressed mainstream political participation and organization. Led by a host of colorful characters, including Mary Elizabeth Lease, a Kansas school teacher and lawyer famous for a recommendation that farmers should, quote, raise less corn and more hell, which of course would cause them to go broke. The alliance sought to appeal to blacks and widen its base. White Southerners, however, never supported the Colored Farmers Alliance, and it disappeared within a few years. Meanwhile, every move to expand the appeal of the agrarians to one group, such as the freedmen, alienated other groups or ethnic groups. So you have a big problem here in that a lot, remember our Civil War lectures, a lot of your freedmen were sharecroppers or were farmers. And you can't form a union if half or more of the union members, i.e. the whites, don't want to be associated with the other half, the blacks. So it was really an issue of racism that kept the farmers from having more clout. Despite the flamboyance of characters like Lease and sockless Jerry Simpson, it was Charles W. McCune, the Alliance president, who formulated a genuine political plan of action. McCune advocated government loans monetized by the issue of new greenbacks or other types of government legal tender notes, thus inflating the currency. So again, going way back to the Civil War lectures, you'll remember that the greenbacks were unbacked dollars. That is to say, they didn't have a specific amount of gold in the U.S. Treasury backing them like U.S. bank notes or national bank notes did. If you held a dollar bill that said national bank note, there supposedly in your bank's vault was a silver dollar or enough gold to back that $1. That was not the case with greenbacks. They were simply what we call fiat money. They were backed by a promise to redeem them in either gold and silver or national bank notes at a future date, but not yet. Okay, so they held on their face something that we still have. I don't have a dollar bill handy, but you look at a dollar bill, it says this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private, which I think at some point is going to bring a serious court case, because you'll notice that after COVID, so many of our businesses don't take cash. They're credit card only. Well, me personally, I think that's a violation of the Constitution that says on our money, that our money is legal tender, meaning you must take it for all debts, public and private. Doesn't say for only those debts you wish to take it for. It says for all debts. So it'll be interesting to see, and I've asked this of a couple of lawyers, and nobody really seems to be able to go with this and figure out where this is going to land, whether or not you can truly have a cashless society so long as the U.S. government is printing any money at all. Because the requirement is that you must take that money for debts, but we'll see how that works out. But by the way, what the farmers wanted to do with all this was have the government issue or print brand new money based on nothing. Sound familiar? And put it out in the form of these greenbacks and then emit it into the banking system via banks, thereby causing inflation, which is what these farmers really wanted, because their prices for their crops had dropped so low. This was a period of deflation, falling prices. And normally it wouldn't have mattered. Well, I say normally. Very few people like deflation, even when they are financially benefiting from it. That is, even when their money is buying more than ever, it just feels bad because we're used to stuff going up. And if your paycheck is going up and if what you're getting for your goods and services is going up, well, you feel good. Even if the cost of all other goods and services is going up a little faster, it's still generally, until you get to really high inflation, like we had during COVID, then it starts to feel pretty bad. But nobody likes deflation. It seems to just have one of those bad feelings about it. And so worse for the farmers. At the time, they were in the habit of getting fixed rate mortgage loans. Okay, what's a mortgage? A mortgage is a loan on your house or farm or a building. It is usually much, much lower rate, carries a much, much lower rate than a credit card or even a car loan. Okay, my current house that I have now, which we got right after we moved here in 2016, has an amazingly low 2.9% mortgage. I mean, that's almost free money, right? This is why many of the money advisors will tell you don't pay your mortgage off, because especially if you have a good interest rate, because you can deduct your mortgage interest payments from your taxes. And there's two sides to that. Other side says don't ever be in debt to anybody. I get that. I'm just saying, in the late 1800s, the farmers had fixed rate mortgages that were right here at, let's say, 5%. I don't know what they were, but let's say it's 5%. But the value of all of their crops was falling. So what they got for their corn, for their wheat, for all other crops was increasingly less and less, even though, forget the mortgage for a second, if you went to the general store to buy a rake or to buy clothes or buy a saddle or whatever, those prices would have fallen dramatically too. But what bothered the farmers was that their mortgages did not change, and they still had to make those higher mortgage payments with less and less and less cash anymore. And it was getting hard to do. So this is the big issue with the farmers in the late 1800s. The idea of inflation, either by monetization of silver through the creation of new fiat money issued by the government, took on the life of its own as the end of all agrarian unrest. Farmers, sharecroppers, and any of the Southern or Western poor, for that matter, had become indoctrinated by pamphlets and incessant speeches that the solution to their problems is merely more money. Remember, money unbacked by real productive growth is inflation and is deadly. With little instruction about the ramifications of money creation at the government level. William Coin Harvey, for example, in his popular book, Coin's Financial School, 1894, offered a conspiratorial worldview of a money system controlled by sinister, often Jewish bankers who, like an octopus, a favorite conspiracy symbol, had their tentacles throughout the international banking system, which is garbage. Most of the big American banks are run by Protestants, particularly Episcopalians, like the Mormons, like the Morgans, not the Mormons. They had their own bank, the Zion National Bank, which was a standalone bank. Other conspiracy-oriented books included 7 Financial Conspiracies, which have enslaved the American people by Sarah E.V. Emery, 1887, and Mary Lisa's own The Problem of Civilization Solved in 1895, which raised the specter of both international banking cartels and racial pollution as the cause of American farmers' plight. In these scenarios, the Rothschilds and other Jews of Europe, operating through a nebulous network in London, sometimes with the aid of the Bank of England and Wall Street, conspired to contract the money supply to benefit the lending classes. So isn't it interesting? If the Jews and the Rothschilds constrict the money supply, that's their doing. The money supply is shrinking, therefore we have deflation. But if we have inflation, well, that's the fault of the bankers too. You can't win with these conspiracy theorists. The developments surrounding the silver and gold issue in the late 19th century originated with an international deflation that set in during the 1870s, but were in no way the work of Rothschilds or other allegedly nefarious groups. These international forces were largely hidden from domestic critics and inflationists who thought that increasing wage levels allowed them to pay back fixed debts with increasingly cheap dollars. They ignored the fact that all other prices rise and that although mortgages may stay constant, the price of seed, tools, farm implements, clothing, and fuel increases, eating up whatever savings are gained through the temporary artificial advantage in the mortgage payments. Nevertheless, at the time, the postbellum policies of the U.S. government appeared to cause agrarian and labor distress. Now, let me say something else about this. Once you generate the inflation, yes, it's true. If you currently hold a mortgage here and your prices go up, you're going to start getting more money for your corn than you're paying out for your mortgage, in theory. But if you're a new borrower, so you're just coming out west, that's okay for people who already have their mortgages. And by the way, back then, mortgages were 5 to 15 years. They were really short. Today's mortgages are 30 and 40-year mortgages. But for anyone new coming out, getting a new mortgage, you're not going to pay that guy's low interest rate mortgage. As inflation goes up, mortgage rates go up as well. I'm here to tell you, I just looked at mortgage rates in our area last week, and they were 7%. Remember, I got mine at less than half that, 2.9%. Why? Because inflation has gone up. And banks have to raise their money, have to raise their rates in order to pay for the money that they get. And the Federal Reserve has to raise what it charges member banks, or it'll go broke. So it's silly to think that you can just arbitrarily be a Wizard of Oz, wave a magic wand, and suddenly prices will go up and everybody will be happy. If prices go up in one place, they usually go up everywhere, which is what we've seen after COVID with eggs and meat and everything else. I remember, this shows you how old I am. I remember gas at 25 to 30 cents a gallon. I remember filling up a car for, I don't know, $5. I remember going to Taco Bell when items were 25 cents each and coming home with 5 items for under $1.50. Currently, you go to a place like Panera, just get a soup, one of their meals, right, a drink. It's going to be $15 to $20. I think having a super meal at McDonald's, fries, drink, large drink, and entree now is close to $17. It began, the agrarian labor distress, began with Congress's 1873 decision not to monetize silver, meaning not to make silver official conversion, where you have to convert banknotes into silver dollars. You still could, and people still did, but you had to convert banknotes into gold if requested, because that was the law. So they decided not to monetize silver in 1873, but to resume redemption of the Civil War era greenbacks in 1879, putting the country on a de facto gold standard. So I know it's pretty detailed and difficult to follow, but remember those greenbacks we talked about, issued during the Civil War, no gold backing. Okay, but they had this is legal tender for all debts, public and private, on it. Okay. In 1879, the government said in 1879, we're going to start paying out gold, $1 gold for every 16 greenbacks. That was the ratio of gold to silver to greenbacks. 1 greenback to 1 silver dollar, 16 silver dollars to 1 gold dollar. So they said in 1879, we're going to start up again, paying out gold for those pieces of paper. Okay. That had the effect, when you do not monetize silver, that had the effect of putting the U.S. back on a gold standard and a gold standard alone, where everything was convertible into gold, in theory. Following a decade's worth of increased silver production originating with the Comstock lode in 1859, that had changed the ratio of exchange between silver and gold. So when you got the Comstock lode, more silver started coming out of the ground on average for miners than gold did. For a while, it was regular 15 to 1. 15 ounces of silver. Oh, I got 1 ounce of gold over here. But then it slightly rose to 16 to 1. But starting in 1859, that ratio begins to inch up. Gold became more expensive, but the cheaper, more abundant silver was more widely available. Obviously, there was more silver. This seemed to offer an opportunity for a government action. If the government could be forced to purchase all silver at fixed prices, i.e. higher than what the market would pay, like anything, a fixed price says you must purchase it at this price or nothing. You say, well, it's not worth that. So no, you must purchase it there. Higher than what the market price was, and coin it, silver miners would receive artificial price increases, and the new silver coins would flood the West and South, providing, they thought, a solution to the monetary question. Congress rejected this scenario. Civil rights labeled the action the crime of 73. Congress rejected it because it was artificial. Silver wasn't worth that much. The more silver relative to gold that came out of the ground, the less valuable silver was. Do you all follow me on that? Okay. So at one time, it was 15 silver dollars to 1 gold dollar. Then it inched up to 16 silver dollars to 1 gold dollar. By 1879, 80, it's starting to be 17 silver ounces to 1 gold ounce, or 17 silver dollars to 1 gold dollar. Now, if you can just say with a government order, you must purchase and print and mint all silver at 16 to 1, but the real value of silver is 17 to 1, that means that theoretically, you could keep going into a bank with 16 silver dollars and get a gold dollar. And every time you did that, in theory, have a silver dollar left over because it's coming out at 17 to 1. See that? You do that enough, you got some serious money. Remember again, dollars back then were worth a whole lot more. Well, imagine if you're what we call a speculator. And a speculator makes his living on the margin. A speculator looks at small differences in prices, whether it's this stock or this coin or that coin or this oil or that oil, and buys and sells based on those very small margins. But if you do it in big enough amounts, we're talking millions of dollars at a time, and you're making $1 million silver dollar profit on your exchange each time, that's serious, serious money. Let's see. Meanwhile, the Treasury under John Sherman had carefully accumulated enough gold that the resumption occurred smoothly, resuming paying gold for greenbacks. Prior to the resumption, pressures from Westerners and Southerners to counteract the slow deflation that had gripped the economy led to calls for new issues of greenbacks. Let's just print more money. Alliance-related greenbackers even succeeded in electing 44 congressmen sympathetic to the movement and 4 pro-alliance governors in the years preceding 1892. Farmers increasingly found their calls for regulation and control of business drowned out by a larger new coalition of Westerners and Southerners who wanted the monetization of silver as the cure to all agrarian ills. Since the early 1870s, worldwide deflationary pressure had forced prices down. Farm prices fell more than others, or so it seemed. Actually, it depended entirely on the crop as to whether prices genuinely dropped or stayed relatively even with other products. Despite the roundly criticized crime of 73, the U.S. government had little impact on the price level, except when it came to banknotes. Since the Civil War, national banks had been the sole source of note issue in the United States, meaning they were the only place where you could print new money. And that money had to be backed by U.S. government bonds held by the comptroller of the currency. And those bonds, in theory, had to be backed by gold. That meant that the notes tended to be more plentiful where there were many national banks and less so where there were fewer. If you have more national banks in your area and they are all capable of printing money, you're going to have more money. And that was not the South. Both the South and the West were at a disadvantage in that case. The South, because the comptroller of the currency was unlikely to give a bank charter to either former Confederates or freedmen. So after the Civil War, it's going to be pretty hard to start a bank in the South because the comptroller of the currency looked at who was asking to start the bank, and it was a bunch of former Confederates. He said, I don't want to give them a bank charter. Well, who's your only alternative? Blacks. And they had no capital. They had no property to secure anything. Saying, well, I'm not going to give them a loan or a bank charter. So there were no banks started in the South, very, very few, where a lot of banks were going up in the West, which had largely backed the Union effort. Each region clamored for more money. Now, by the way, when I say the West, I mean California largely, and Illinois, and the near West. The far plains West had no population, so they didn't have many banks either. They had a few, but not many. When the Western silver mines proved richer than even the original prospectors had dreamed, both regions, the South and the West, saw silver as a means to address the shortfall. In 1878, Richard Silver Dick Bland, that's his name, of Missouri, and William Allison of Iowa introduced a measure for, quote, free and unlimited coinage of silver at a ratio of 16 silver ounces for 1 gold ounce. Fearing a veto from President Hayes, Allison introduced amendments that limited the total silver purchase to $4 million per month at market prices. Allison's amendments essentially took the teeth from the bill by robbing it of its artificial advantages for the holders of free silver. Nevertheless, it reflected the new West-South coalition around free silver, meaning the purchase of all Western silver that could be mined and its coinage at inflated rates of 16 ounces of silver to every ounce of gold. This was stated in the parlance of the day as 16 to 1, when the real relation between silver and gold was 17 to 1. Put another way, silverites would be subsidized at taxpayer expense. So what were they trying to do? Silver Dick Bland and Allison were trying to force the government to buy silver at 17 to 1, but buy it and mint it at a ratio of 16 to 1, meaning that in theory, there were a lot more silver dollars, that one extra silver dollar coming in as a result of every transaction, that could be minted and put out into the economy. In short, inflation. It was a way of inflating silver, right? We always hear from the gold bugs that, well, you can't inflate gold and can't inflate silver. Sure you can. Roman emperors did it. Everybody's done it in one way or another. You can always find a way to inflate silver or gold by government order if you can get the government to do it. Well, Allison messed this up by putting a cap at only $4 million on this. So that would not allow all the extra 16 to 1 plus the one extra that's going to go out into circulation. It didn't allow all that to go in. So it basically didn't do anything except screw up the economy, because the government is involved in artificially changing the relationship between silver and gold. And again, speculators get involved. And this all comes, by the way, at the taxpayer's expense. They are the ones paying the extra for the extra silver that's being coined artificially low. By Grover Cleveland's time, the federal mints had coined 215 million silver dollars, with more than 3/4 of them in government vaults and only 50 million actual circulation. Again, exactly what the silverites did not want to happen. Meanwhile, as miners hauled more silver in to exchange for gold, the government saw its gold supply dwindle steadily. Why not? Why should you mine gold if you can mine silver and with every transaction of 16 to 1 have a silver dollar left over? Everybody go into mining silver. Nobody's mining gold. So, had the government circulated all the silver coins, it would not have produced prosperity but inflation. Prices on existing goods would have gone up, but there would have been no new incentive to produce new goods. Instead, a different problem arose. The government had to pay gold to its creditors, most of them foreign, but had to accept less valuable silver from its debtors, all those farmers and so forth. So the government is going broke, paying gold to outsiders, but taking in less silver from insiders. Congress formed into two groups, one around free silver, intending to increase the silver purchases and push for full bimetallism, that is, silver and gold are legal tender, and another around the gold standard. Cleveland was in the latter group. With a hostile president and enough gold bugs in the House and Senate to prevent veto overrides, the silver issue stalled throughout the remainder of Cleveland's term, but it would resurface with a vengeance under Harrison. So I think that's a pretty good place to stop for today. We'll pick up next time with the shame of the cities. And remember, if you need a curriculum, go get it at the Wild World of History. And I will see you guys next time.